An inexperienced young rancher found refuge with two imposing Apache women. The evening that followed altered his existence permanently. Boon Carter had encountered no females quite like them previously. As the tempest forced him toward their remote dwelling, he anticipated discovering comfort and security. What he discovered instead were two sets of penetrating dark eyes examining him with a focus that caused his hands to tremble. The downpour beat relentlessly against the timber walls while he remained standing, water dripping from his frame in their entrance, his hat pressed firmly to his chest. Ayana, the more statuesque sister, glided with seamless elegance while beckoning him to enter. Her lengthy ebony locks flowed across shoulders wider than those of most males in his acquaintance. Ka, the younger yet equally commanding sibling, observed from her position near the hearth where she had been honing a blade for hunting. "Your clothing is completely saturated," Ayana noted, her speech carrying an inflection that brought to mind wind whistling through rocky gorges. "Remove those damp garments before illness overtakes you." Boone's complexion flushed crimson. At his family's homestead, his mother continued to select his daily attire. At 22 years of age, he had never been unaccompanied with a single woman, much less two who dominated their environment as though they possessed the atmosphere itself. "I could remain by the flames until my clothes become dry," he stuttered. Kaia glanced up from her weapon, entertainment sparkling in her gaze. "Do you intend to remain there trembling like a soaked canine throughout the entire night?" The dwelling appeared more cramped than it had seemed from the exterior. Woven floor coverings adorned the timber planks, while pelts from various animals decorated the walls alongside implements he could not identify. Everything conveyed independence, suggesting women who required no assistance to endure in this unforgiving territory. Ayana approached a container in the corner, retrieving a coarse covering. "Your bashfulness will not provide warmth, young man." The term stung more deeply than it ought to have. He was a mature adult, possessed property, managed livestock, yet standing in this place, moisture collecting at his footwear, while these women observed him with barely hidden impatience. He felt like a protected child he had always remained. Thunder exploded above them, causing him to startle. Both sisters stayed completely motionless, as though storms represented nothing beyond ambient sound of their ears. What length of time had they spent dwelling here in solitude? Where had their relatives gone, their people? "The tempest will continue until sunrise," Ka stated, rising to her complete stature. She stood nearly matching his height, her commanding presence occupying the space, separating them. "The matter at hand is determining what manner of individual you will become when daylight arrives." Her statement carried significance he failed to comprehend. Something in her inflection presented a dare that accelerated his heartbeat with more than mere terror. For as he gazed between the two sisters, Boone understood this evening would examine more than simply his capacity to endure the storm. It would test everything he believed he understood regarding his own nature. Boone's teeth clicked together as he remained frozen at the center of their cabin, still gripping his drenched hat. The fire popped and crackled behind Ka, throwing warm illumination across her sharp facial features, yet he seemed unable to approach its heat. "He fears us," Kaia remarked to her sibling, making no attempt to speak quietly. She placed her blade aside and folded her arms, examining him like an entertaining riddle. "Can his reaction surprise you?" Ayana responded, approaching Boone with predatory smoothness. He has likely never witnessed a woman wielding a weapon previously. Never observed women who required no protection. Kaia supplemented with a keen smile. Boone's jaw grew rigid. "Fear does not control me." Both sisters released laughter that reverberated throughout the cabin walls, intensifying the burning in his cheeks. The amusement was not precisely malicious, yet contained understanding he lacked. "Then demonstrate," Ayana declared, halting sufficiently close that he detected sage and burning with fragrances on her skin. "Remove those soaked garments before sickness claims you." His hands shook as he unfastened his shirt, intensely conscious of their observation. At his home, he represented the shielded son, kept away from frontier life's harsher aspects. His father managed the hazardous tasks, while Boone handled the records and cared for the gentler creatures. The shirt struck the floor with a wet sound. His chest, pale from years of wearing long sleeves even during summer, appeared pathetic compared to these women who moved as though they had been sculpted from the terrain itself. Thin, Kaia noted, angling her head. However, muscle exists beneath. Ranch labor. Cattle, he succeeded in saying, wrapping the covering around himself with trembling fingers. Our father bred horses, Ayana said, settling into a chair that groaned under her weight. He instructed us to tame them without destroying their essence. Where has he gone now? Boon inquired before he could prevent himself. The sisters shared a glance that extended too long. Something passed between them. Communication he could not decipher, but which made the atmosphere feel more oppressive. Departed, Kaia stated simply, like all the others. Yet we remained, Ayana added, her voice containing a sharpness that made Boon's skin tingle with unease. Someone was required to stay. For what reason? The question escaped despite his better judgment. Ka moved toward the window, gazing through rain-streaked glass at the storm outside. This territory requires strength, and most individuals... She looked back at him with meaning. Most individuals prefer fleeing to discovering their true capabilities. Her manner of speaking made Boon's stomach contract with equal measures of fear and something else he could not identify. Challenge? Excitement? Do you plan to flee when morning arrives? Ayana asked, her dark eyes focused on his face. B. Boon parted his lips to respond, then realized he lacked knowledge of what he would say for looking at these women who had chosen to remain when others escaped. He wondered if they perceived something within him that he had never recognized in himself, and he was uncertain whether he desired to discover what it might be. The storm continued raging outside, while Boon sat wrapped in the rough covering, observing the sisters navigate their evening activities with practiced effectiveness. Every movement they made spoke of years living without men for support. Ayana prepared a simple meal of preserved meat and roots, her actions economical and confident. Ka cleaned her knife with slow, intentional strokes that made Boon's pulse accelerate for reasons he could not understand. The quiet extended between them, interrupted only by rain against the windows and the crackling of burning timber. You continue staring, Kaia noted without raising her eyes from her blade. Is there something you wish to inquire about? Heat flooded Boon's cheeks. I was merely wondering about the duration of your isolation here. 3 winters, Ayana answered, placing a wooden bowl next to him. The meat proved tough, yet was flavored with herbs that made his mouth water. Since the military personnel passed through. Military personnel? The knife ceased moving in Kaia's hands. Both sisters became still in a manner that made the atmosphere feel threatening. They sought raiders, Ayana said cautiously. Destroyed homesteads, stolen livestock, the sort of trouble that accompanies desperate times. Did they locate those they hunted? Another weighted glance passed between the women. Kaia resumed cleaning her knife, but her movements had become sharp, hostile. They discovered what they anticipated finding, she said, her voice flat as stone. Boon desired to press for additional information, but something in their expressions deterred him. Instead, he ate silently, acutely aware of how the blanket had shifted to reveal his shoulders. The way Ayana's eyes lingered on his bare skin made his stomach tighten with unfamiliar heat. You differ from my expectations, she said suddenly. What were your expectations? Most men arriving here flee from something. Debts, legal troubles, a woman they betrayed. Her dark eyes searched his face. But you're fleeing towards something, aren't you? The question caught him unprepared. Was he? He had departed his family's ranch that morning to inspect distant grazing areas. But the storm had driven him miles from his intended path. Or had it? I don't comprehend your meaning. Ka laughed, but no humor accompanied it. He doesn't even understand himself yet. Understand what? What kind of man you truly are beneath all that careful upbringing? Ayana leaned forward, close enough that he could see golden specks in her brown eyes. Your family maintained your softness, provided protection. But there's something else present, isn't there? Something that brought you to our entrance. Her breath warmed his face. The scent of sage and femininity made his head spin. But her words shook him more, because she spoke truth. There was something within him, something that had always felt imprisoned by his sheltered existence. The storm intensifies, Ka said, moving to examine the door's heavy wooden barrier. No one departs until morning. As she secured their defenses against the night, Boon wondered if the real storm wasn't external at all. It was occurring within him, where these dangerous women were awakening aspects of himself he had never known existed. The fire had diminished, casting dancing shadows across the cabin walls. Boon shifted on the rough wooden chair, hyper-aware of every sound the sisters made while preparing for sleep. His clothes hung near the flames, still damp but warming. "You cannot sleep sitting upright all night," Ayana said, unrolling a thick fur beside the fireplace. "Space exists here." Boon's mouth became dry. The thought of lying so close to these women with only a thin blanket separating him from the unknown made his heart race. The chair will suffice. Kaia snorted as she settled onto her own bedrobe. "Pride will provide you with a stiff neck and cold bones, but please yourself." As the sisters arranged themselves for sleep, Boon caught glimpses of brown skin and curved silhouettes that made him look away quickly. He had never shared sleeping quarters with women outside his family. Everything about this situation violated the careful boundaries his upbringing had constructed around him. "Describe your ranch to us," Ayana said softly, her voice carrying through the darkness. "What is that protected life like?" "It isn't protected," he protested, though even he could hear how weak the words sounded. "No? When did you last face genuine danger, genuine choice?" Boon opened his mouth to answer and realized he could not. His father had always handled the difficult decisions, the dangerous work. Even their cattle drives followed established safe routes. "That confirms my thoughts," Kaia murmured from her bedroom. "You've been living someone else's concept of who you should be." "And who do you believe I should be?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains. But inside, the silence felt charged with possibility. "That's not our decision to make," Ayana said. "But this storm, it has provided you an opportunity to discover." "An opportunity for what?" "To cease being the man your family created and discover who you would be if you had to depend on yourself." Boon felt something shift within his chest, like a door opening onto a room he had never seen. These women saw something in him that nobody else had ever noticed. Not weakness requiring protection, but potential awaiting release. "What if my strength proves insufficient?" "Strength isn't about muscle," Ka said, rolling onto her side to face him. Even in the dim firelight, her eyes gleamed with something that made his breath catch. "It's about understanding your desires and seizing them." "Seizing what?" "Whatever calls to you." Ayana's voice was barely above a whisper. "Whatever makes you feel alive instead of merely safe." Her manner of speaking made heat flood through him. He understood now that she wasn't merely discussing courage in abstract terms. She was discussing desire, the kind of wants he had spent his entire life suppressing. Lightning illuminated the windows, and for a moment, the cabin felt like the only solid thing in a world of storms. But Boon was beginning to realize that the real tempest wasn't outside. It was inside him, growing stronger with every word these dangerous women spoke. And for the first time in his life, he wanted to let it loose. Sleep avoided Boon. Every time he closed his eyes, he became aware of the sisters breathing in the darkness, the rustle of fur against skin when they shifted position. The chair had grown unbearably uncomfortable, but moving to the floor beside him felt like crossing a line he wasn't sure he was ready to cross. Around midnight, a new sound cut through the storm's noise. Scratching at the door, accompanied by low whining. Ka sat up instantly, knife already in her hand. "Coyote pack," she whispered. "Storms have driven them down from a high country." More scratching, more insistent now. The wooden door was thick, but Boon could hear claws working at the gaps around the frame. "How many?" Ayana asked, rising silently to her feet. "At least 3, maybe more." Ka moved a window, peering through a crack in the shutters. "They're hungry, desperate." The scratching intensified, joined by growling that made Boon's skin crawl. He had heard stories of coyote packs attacking humans when prey was scarce, but he had never faced them himself. "What do we do?" he asked, hating how his voice shook. Both sisters looked at him with expressions he couldn't read. Then Ayana moved to the wall, where several rifles hung on wooden pegs. "We defend our home," she said simply, checking the weapon's load. The question is, will you assist or hide? The words hit him like a slap. He thought of all the times his father had sent him to the house when danger threatened. All the times he had been protected instead of included. I don't know how to fight coyotes. Then you'll learn. Ka tossed him a heavy wooden club from beside the fireplace. Really simple. They come through that door. You hit them until they stop moving. The weight of the club in his hands felt foreign, but somehow right. His palms were slick with sweat. But for the first time since arriving, he didn't feel completely helpless. There's another way, Ayana said, studying his face in the firelight. We could wait them out. Hope they lose interest and move on. Is that what you'd do if I wasn't here? The sisters exchanged one of their loaded glances. No, Ka admitted. We'd go out there and drive them off. Show them this territory belongs to us. Then that's what we do. The word surprised him as much as them. But looking at these women who had chosen to stay when others fled, who faced danger instead of hiding from it, something inside him shifted. He was tired of being protected, tired of being safe. You're certain? Ayana asked, her voice softer than he had heard it. Once we go out there, there's no reversing it. You'll have crossed the line. Boon gripped the club tighter and moved toward the door. His heart hammered against his ribs. But underneath the fear was something else. Excitement. Purpose. Maybe it's time I cross some lines. For the first time since he had arrived, both sisters smiled at him with something that looked like approval. And Boon realized that was exactly what he'd been hungry for all along. The cold night air struck Boon's bare chest like a physical blow as they stepped onto the covered porch. Rain drove sideways in sheets, but he could make out lean shapes moving in the darkness beyond the cabin's edge. Yellow eyes reflected the light spilling from the doorway. Stay between us, Ka instructed, raising her rifle. Don't swing that club unless one gets past our shots. But as they moved into the storm, the pack circled wider than expected. One of the coyotes, bolder than the others, darted around the cabin's far corner. Before either sister could react, it was charging straight at Boon. Time slowed. The animal's snarling face filled his vision. Teeth bared and muscles bunched for the leap. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to call for help, to let someone else handle the danger. Instead, he planted his feet and swung the club. The impact jarred his arms to the shoulders. The coyote yelped and rolled sideways, stunned but not finished. It scrambled to its feet, blood streaming from its muzzle, eyes now fixed on him with pure hatred. Again! Ayana shouted over the storm. The animal lunged once more. This time, Boon was ready. He sidestepped and brought the club down hard across its spine. The coyote collapsed and didn't get up. The rest of the pack melted back into the darkness, spooked by the sudden violence and their pack-mate stillness. Within moments, only the storm remained. Boon stood over the fallen animal, chest heaving, rain washing the sweat from his skin. His whole body shook, but not with fear, with something else entirely. Well, Ka said, lowering her rifle. Look at that. Ayana moved to his side, so closer warmth cut through the cold wind. When she looked up at him, her expression held something new, something that made heat pool low in his belly despite the freezing rain. How do you feel? She asked. Boone searched for words and came up empty. How did he feel? Alive in a way he had never experienced. Raw, powerful, like he had shed an old skin and found something stronger underneath. Different, he finally managed. Good different or bad different? He met her eyes, saw his reflection in them, and barely recognized a man looking back. Still slight, still young, but something fundamental had changed in his posture, his expression. Good, definitely good. Ka laughed, a sound rich with approval. Told you there was something else in there. They helped him drag the coyote's body away from the cabin before heading back inside. As Ayana barred the door behind them, Boon Carter watching him with an intensity that made his pulse quicken all over again. You're not the same man who walked through that door, she observed. She was right. The scared boy who had sought shelter from the storm was gone. In his place stood someone who had faced real danger and discovered he was strong enough to handle it. What happens now? He asked. Both sisters moved closer, their presence surrounding him with heat and possibility. Now, Kaia said, her voice low and intimate. "We find out what other lines you're ready to cross." The way she said it made clear they weren't talking about coyotes anymore. And for the first time in his life, Boone felt ready for whatever came next. Back inside the cabin, Boone's wet skin steamed in the firelight. The sisters watched him towel off with expressions that had changed completely from when he had first arrived. Where before they had seen a scared boy, now they studied him like they were seeing a man for the first time. "Sit," Ayana commanded, patting the fur beside her. "You're shaking." But it wasn't from cold anymore. The adrenaline from the fight had awakened something primal in him, something that responded to the way Kaia was looking at him with newfound respect. As he settled beside Ayana, she pressed a cup of herbal tea into his hands. Her fingers brushed his, and this time he didn't pull away. The contact sent heat racing up his arm. "Tell us about your family," she said, her voice softer than he had heard it. "Why they kept you so protected." The question should have made him defensive, but instead, he found himself speaking freely. "My mother lost 3 babies before me. When I survived, she couldn't bear the thought of losing me too. And my father..." He paused, searching for words. "He saw me as something precious that needed guarding. Instead of a man who needed testing," Kaia observed, settling on his other side. The warmth of their bodies pressed close made his head spin. These women who had seemed so dangerous hours ago now felt like harbors in a storm he was finally ready to weather. "What about you?" he asked. "Why did you really stay when your people left?" The sisters exchanged another of their meaningful looks. Then Ayana sighed, a sound that held years of pain. "The soldiers came looking for raiders," she said quietly. "But they didn't care about guilt or innocence. They wanted someone to pay for the stolen cattle, the burned homesteads. They took the men first," Ka continued, her voice hard as stone. "Our father, our brothers, our cousins, said they would be held until the real raiders were found. Were they ever found? No, because the soldiers had already decided who was guilty." Ayana's hand found his arm, her touch both comfort and connection. "The men never came back. Understanding crashed over Boone like a cold wave. So you stayed to guard their memory." "We stayed because someone had to, because running felt like giving up everything we had ever loved." He looked between these remarkable women who had chosen grief and isolation over safety and felt something shift in his chest. They hadn't just survived tragedy. They had transformed it into strength. "I used to think courage meant not being afraid," he said slowly. "But watching you two, I think maybe it means being afraid and choosing to stay anyway." Kaia's hand joined her sister's on his arm. "And what do you choose, Boon Carter?" The way she said his name made it sound like something precious. He looked into their faces, saw acceptance there instead of judgment, strength instead of pity. "I choose to stay," he said quietly, "at least until morning." But even as he said it, he wondered if morning would find him able to leave it all, because somewhere in the space between fear and courage, he had discovered a version of himself worth becoming. Dawn broke clear and sharp, the storm finally exhausted. Boone woke to find himself lying between the sisters on the thick furs, their breathing deep and even on either side of him. Sometime during the night they had drawn close together for warmth, and now their bodies formed a tangle of limbs and shared heat that made his pulse quicken. He had crossed more than lines during that long night, in whispered conversations by firelight, in touches that grew bolder as the hours passed, in the way they had looked at him when he proved he could stand his ground. He had crossed into territory he had never imagined existed. Ayana stirred first, her dark eyes opening to find him watching her. Instead of moving away, she smiled with an intimacy that made his chest tight. "How do you feel?" she asked. The same question from the night before, but weighted with different meaning now. "Like I've been sleeping my whole life until now." Kaia stretched on his other side, her hand finding his chest. "And now you're awake." It was true. Every sensation felt sharper, every emotion more real. The careful boundaries that had defined his existence had dissolved completely, leaving someone he barely recognized but finally understood. "I have to go back," he said, though the words felt like swallowing glass. "My family will worry." "We know," Ayana said simply, "but you won't be going back as the same man who left." She was right. The thought of returning to his old life, the protection, the careful limits, the fear of everything that might hurt him, felt impossible now. How could he pretend to be small when these women had shown him how large he could be? What will you tell them? Kai asked. Boon considered this as he rose and began dressing in his dry clothes. What would he tell them? That he had discovered courage in the arms of two Apache sisters? That he had learned the difference between being safe and being alive? The truth, he decided, that I got caught in a storm and found shelter with two remarkable women who taught me what I was capable of. Both sisters smiled at that, and the approval in their expressions warmed him more than the morning sun streaming through the windows. As he prepared to leave, Ayana pressed something into his hand, a small carved piece of wood, smooth from years of handling. "So you remember," she said quietly. He looked down at the carving, a hawk in flight, wings spread wide. "I won't forget." "Good," Kaia said, moving to stand beside her sister. "Because the man who walks out that door isn't the boy who walked in." She was absolutely right. Boon Carter had sought shelter from a storm, and instead found himself transformed by two towering Apache sisters who had seen something in him that no one else ever had. They had challenged his fears, awakened his desires, and shown him that real strength came not from being protected, but from choosing to face whatever life demanded. As he mounted his horse and looked back at the cabin one last time, both sisters stood in the doorway watching him. The sight of them, proud, strong, unbroken by loss, burned itself into his memory. That night had changed him forever. And riding toward home, Boon knew he would never be content with anything less than the full, dangerous, beautiful life they had shown him was possible. The virgin rancher who had sought shelter was gone forever, replaced by a man who had finally learned what it meant to be truly alive. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable tale of transformation and courage in the untamed frontier, where destiny and human connection collide in ways you never expected. Don't forget to subscribe and consider a super chat to help us keep bringing you more stories like these. Your support means everything to us.